Joy.
And I'm going to let everybody in now. So yeah, John, if you just kind of count down from 5 in your head, and then we should be good to go.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks for turning up for this Zoom call today. As you probably deduced, I'm John Beddington, and whilst we're waiting for various people to join, I think just a few sort of lessons that I'd like you to follow. The basic housekeeping points is we don't want you to keep your camera on so that your face, we can see you. So no need to mute. If you've got a problem with your broadband, then obviously, go to audio only. But also, towards the end of the meeting, we're going to have a sort of Q&A and comment session. And what I'd like you to do is to actually signal with a hand that you want to speak, and then you'll come onto my screen. I can actually take only 16 people on the screen, and there's about 35 people present. So I'm going to need your help. If you actually go and indicate you by raising your hand electronically, then you will appear and I'll come to you in turn. So that's the first thing. And basically, when we move into the discussion, I'd like you to be aware of the arithmetic, because there's 35 people and we've got about 20 minutes, depending on whether speakers go a bit over time. And so long division would say how much time would be a reasonable expectation of your apportionment in the meeting. So I will not be rudely interrupting you. I will just interrupt you if you're going on a bit. I think it's perfectly okay to make a comment, perfectly okay to actually raise a complicated question. And what I do is ask you all to remain muted until you actually want to raise a question and actually start talking. That's sort of part that. So that's the housekeeping. Just a sort of little bit of background. I was asked to do this by Tariq from Birmingham University. He sent me an email saying something like, "I still have the photos, so we'd like your help," which brought me to the front of dealing with this. And the idea was really one that appealed to me a great deal. Some of you may know, but I was the Chief Scientific Advisor to the government, and therefore thinking hard about policy in a whole series of areas. But when I took this particular chair of the commission on, my heavens, we were in a different world. We had not agreed the terms of our exit from the European Union, so Brexit was looming large. We had got President Trump in the White House, and I will make no further comment on that. And we didn't have COVID. So things have changed, some for good, some for bad. Again, I won't point it out, but it is one heck of a different world. And obviously, one of the things that has actually happened in that intervening period is that there has been, the enormous disruption to the world economy, to supply chain, and that's still going on. There's terribly good news in terms of the COVID front on vaccines and their efficacy, and the decision made by governments to actually make certain vaccines get around the world will indeed help us. But I think the COVID crisis is not over. As the Chancellor was saying yesterday, the economic crisis, certainly for the UK, but it's also throughout the world, is going to be vast and have ramifications. So that's one of the new things, but some of the other things are really with us and continue to be with us. And I think it's fair to say that most sort of world commentators would say, as far as COVID is concerned, this is something that could be solved by development of vaccines in a year or so, it will still be with us, but the vaccine technology has moved on, so it can be addressed quite well. Climate change is not in that situation. Climate change is happening. Even the skeptics are now recognizing this is happening. And I think that the problems that climate change is going to bring over the next decade are so massive. And this is really why this commission is so important, because so much of the technology that is being developed, has been developed and will be developed, is going to rely deeply on the supply and the reasonable sustainability and resilience of the supply of technically critically important metals. And so this is really important, I would say, to the future of the world. So this is one of the reasons that I took this on. I had a boyish dream also that Birmingham University would take me to fine restaurants, offer me beautiful glasses of wine, take me to expensive hotels for cocktails. Well, you have to be aware that absolutely none of that has happened. And I think COVID is their excuse, but who knows what their real excuse is. So with that, I'd like to, which are my opening remarks, I'd like to go now into the main substance of our program. And the first thing to do is to I'm going to ask Alan Walton and Paul Anderson to make a presentation. Now, Alan and Paul are the co-directors of the Birmingham Centre for Strategic Elements and Critical Materials. Paul runs the Magnetic Materials Research Group at the University of Birmingham, and Alan is Reader in Inorganic and Materials Chemistry in the School of Chemistry at Birmingham. I won't go for all the other things. They've written me about 7 pages of their minor background, but conscious of the amount of time that we have, I am going to truncate it. Chaps, you can always put it up on your website in bold or something if you need to. So with that, I'll move to you, Alan, and remember to unmute. All of you remember to keep muted, and over to you, Alan.
Thanks for that, Sir John. I'm actually Paul. I'm going to go first. So
you're kicking off, are you? Well, that's not the order I was told, but there we are. This is all par for the course with the Birmingham University organisation. Over to you, Paul.
Absolutely, it's all on a par with our culinary skills as well, Sir John. So apologies for that. So anyway, good morning, everybody. I'll just share my screen here. Bear with me for the connection. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
So good morning and welcome to our Critical Elements and Materials Roundtable preview discussion for the Policy Commission report, which is entitled Securing Technology Critical Metals for Britain, Ensuring the United Kingdom's Supply of Strategic Elements and Critical Materials for a Clean Future. Now, this has been supported by the CREAM network, which is funded by EPSRC and is led by the Universities of Birmingham and Exeter. So, where are we? So this is the sneak preview of our report. I think that's important. It's still undergoing final proofing, so please turn a blind eye to any typo that you may find lurking in the undergrowth. But as Sir John has indicated, the world has moved on rather a lot since we initially started our evidence gathering sessions just over a year ago. And the Commission met 5 times. Already seems like another world, to gather evidence on a full range of topics, including prime resources, supply chain demand and processing capability, end of life, substitution and efficient use, trade, investment and economic and ethical considerations. And it's from the evidence collected in these sessions that the conclusions of the report are largely drawn. So speakers were drawn from right across the supply chain, including end users, such as aerospace, automotive, catalysis, wind turbines, and electronics, from process industries, including mining, refining, alloy production, magnets, batteries, and recycling, from a range of other organizations, such as NGOs dealing, for example, with ethical sourcing, the London Metal Exchange, data management experts, consultants, rare earths, and the Cobalt Institute. So also, we mustn't forget the academics taken from a broad range, including chemistry, social sciences, robotics, materials, science, geology, and law. And although there are many critical materials of importance to the UK economy, we decided to focus in detail on 4 important areas: rare earths, battery materials, platinum group metals, and aerospace metals. And we did this because we felt it was important to consider some areas in detail in order to illustrate the complexity of the subject, and also to help us identify where important gaps in crucial supply chains actually are. And it's at this point, before I move on to the recommendations of the report, that I would like to convey my profound thanks, first to Sir John for expertly chairing the sessions, but also to the commissioners and the witnesses, many of whom are with us today, who gave so freely of their time and expertise, both in evidence sessions and in the writing and proofing of the report. So the report is split into 6 sections: the executive summary, introduction, primary material that deals with extraction and mining, secondary material that deals with recycling and the circular economy, governance and regulation, and the all-important conclusions and recommendations. And I'm going to just spend a bit of time going through the recommendations. There are quite a lot of them because that are interlinked in many ways, because this is quite a complex subject. So the first recommendation is that the UK should create a single body responsible for developing strategic access to technology critical metals and effective interdepartmental collaboration at government level. This body should link the primary and secondary markets for TCMs and develop and oversee a full UK TCM strategy. We should seek opportunities, or the UK should seek opportunities to diversify its access to primary resources of critical materials through resource diplomacy. And this could and should form part of any trade negotiations. We should actively attract and provide support for large-scale strategic supply chain development of TCMs both at home and abroad, and aim to make the UK an international refining centre for specific TCMs by 2025. We should consider measures to accelerate projects that seek to develop our indigenous sources of TCMs, for example, lithium and tungsten, including updating the regulatory environment. We should create individual task forces bridging primary and secondary materials for targeted TCMs. These should identify the investments that would be required to set up primary processing, refining, and recycling facilities for these materials. We should consider introducing incentives to encourage recycling, refining, and processing of technology critical metals in the UK, particularly for processes that deliver a lower environmental footprint than primary sources. We should prioritise technology critical metals in UKRI strategies in areas such as the circular economy, developing substitute materials, and efficient processing techniques for TCMs. We should invest in the skills base, in advanced materials processing and refining of TCMs, and we should urgently address the lack of data on material flows for TCMs into and out of the UK economy. We should review waste management law with a view to promoting recovery of technology critical metals and ensure that there are no unnecessary regulatory barriers. And we should also encourage information exchange through the whole supply chain to ensure the challenges for recyclers are well understood by the product designers. Finally, we should consider how we might ensure sustainability and resilience in the supply chain for TCMs. So Alan, that's my bit finished. It's over to you now for a few words.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I won't keep you too long, John.
Pull the screen down, please. Can we clear it so we can see people?
I will do, John.
Thanks. Great.
Thank you very much, Paul. I mean, what was clear when we started writing this report is just how complex the problem is. And what we tried to do is to drill down into those supply chains and go all the way from the mine through the supply chain into the end user market. And when we started to put this together, I remember someone saying to me that you must be mad to go into that level of detail, but it's a complex problem, you need to. Many of the issues around these materials are common, particularly around the secondary market and around access, but there are specific challenges for some of these materials. And I think the next thing we should do beyond the report is to drill down into specific supply chains and come up with targeted solutions. And now that's starting to happen through organizations such as the APC. As it is a complex problem, it does stem across multiple industries, rather than just one industry on its own, and government departments and countries. Now, in the coming years, the situation in the UK is going to change rapidly. I think there's been an assumption in the past that the UK is less vulnerable to supply of these materials than other countries. But as we move to electrification and hybridization of the aerospace sector and automotive, we will become much more vulnerable through time. Now, unlike the UK, the EU has had a coordinated strategy on critical materials, and that's guided regulation, co-investment, resource diplomacy, and R&D. And in fact, many of the people in the call today and in the Commission have been at the heart of that European policy, and also in the US. And although I don't think we should replicate those approaches, there are lessons that I think we should learn from them. One example is, so I work in rare earths. One example of that was in 2015, I was part of an organization called Ericon that developed a policy for the supply chain for rare earths. It involved over 120 organizations set up by the European Commission, had the whole supply chain in there from mining companies, refiners, alloy producers, magnet processors, machine designers, and recyclers, with over 20 end users. And what it did is it set out a blueprint for how the UK could access these materials through time. It supported research at different TRL levels. It talked about how you would set up pilot plants and then scale them. What's happening now is that we benefited from those research projects, one of which is a program I'm involved in. We've piloted that technology and we're just at the point of taking that to a commercial scale. At the same time, Europe has set up the Rare Earth Alliance. They're now co-investing at 20 to 100 million euro level. And we need to decide quite urgently how and if the UK engages in those programs. Now, the issue, particularly with that supply chain, is we have half of it. We have metal production and alloy production, and the EU has the other half. They don't have that capacity. So there are some decisions to make that are rather urgent. So the time is short. Companies are deciding now where to put refining capacity and processing capability for these materials. And we really need a strategic plan across multiple organizations about how we identify supply chain gaps, how investment goes in, how we incentivize production of these materials in the UK, and look at new technologies, particularly with the lower environmental footprint. Now, what has been encouraging over the last year is that some of this is starting to happen. There's a new project called Met4Tech, which is Francis will talk about later, which is on the circular economy. The APC has been mapping rare earths, and I'm really keen to see that report coming out. There's activities like the Critical Materials Association, which I'm sure Jeff will talk about today. But ultimately, what the key message is, time is short. We've got to rapidly expand these markets in the UK very quickly. For power electronics and motors alone, the APC have identified that this is a £12 billion opportunity, never mind batteries, but the risks of inaction are growing, and we need a coordinated approach. And I'll leave it there.
Thanks very much. Congratulations to the two organisers. You managed to exceed your allocated time by only 35%, but you can always rely on organisers to make these things work. So now I'd like to turn to Andrew Mitchell, who is Director General Exports and UK Trade, Andrew, and also is a CMG, which an honour I share with him. So Andrew, very nice to meet you, and I look forward to your presentation. Over to you, sir.
John, thank you very much indeed, and thanks for the invitation to speak today. I mean, it's a critically important topic. It's one we're thinking an awful lot about. My job title, as you correctly represent it, I'm responsible for exports and also for the work that we do on UK trade. But I'm also responsible for the work that the Department for International Trade does on critical supply chains, and I've led that work since the COVID crisis forced us to the reflection that we needed to think in a way that we hadn't previously about the criticality of supply chains, particularly initially those medical supply chains and those that led across the world to markets that were in flux, highly vulnerable. That had all the impacts that everybody will have seen on particularly PPE, initially ventilators and various other critical medical supplies, but it caused us all to think about the economy as a whole in a slightly different light. We're here obviously today because of the importance, as you've set out and presented so clearly, on the fundamental importance of critical raw materials to the future of the global economy. I'm conscious that's quite a big statement, but it is absolutely clear that these materials and their importance to the technology industry will only grow. And it's the technology industry that's going to generate the high quality jobs and the prosperity that our economies require. So stable, sustainable access to these materials is going to have a major impact on our shared prosperity for sure. And so, that's something that we're thinking about in a way, frankly, that we hadn't previously. We know that the commodities, rare earths, cobalt, graphite, are essential for high value manufacturing sectors, aerospace, automotive, renewable energy, IT, communications, defense industries. We also know that the sustainable exploitation of critical raw materials can fuel development in poorer countries, also a big objective of a government such as ours. They're absolutely integral components in many renewable energy products that will help us all deliver on the sustainable development and the SDGs and our climate change ambitions. I note that the World Bank estimates that 3 billion tons of metals and materials are needed to decarbonize the global energy system by 2050, with more than 30 metals crucial for green energy technologies. So when the stakes are this high, humanity has a track record of competition, even conflict over natural resources. So our approach over the coming years is going to have far-reaching consequences. We can't really afford to get this wrong. So this is something for the global community. It's something for Britain, of course. It's something for the global community. And there are lots of challenges in maintaining a fluid, open, sustainable global supply of CRMs. As was said, vital to advancing our climate and technology ambitions. And this is part of the reason that we've seen the exponential increase in demand for these materials and the risks that then result. Aluminium and copper for wind turbines, cobalt, lithium, nickel for batteries, rare earths for magnets. This is going to increase as new technologies and products for energy generation and storage are developed and rolled out around the world. As I mentioned, COVID-19 put these risks into a very clear focus. We saw lots of disruption upstream on supply, mining and processing operations interrupted. This led to commodity price volatility, value of some commodities sinking considerably, albeit they've largely recovered now. But price volatility negatively impacts investment, producer labour markets, and sustainable growth. Markets, of course, always fluctuate, but predictable open markets for supply are clearly in our wider interests. So we've done quite a lot of thinking on this, as I mentioned recently within the UK government, on the implications of the very obvious reality of the highly concentrated supply of some critical materials in certain geographies, whether that be in mining or processing. We've seen how important diversity of sourcing can be in managing supply chain risk and price volatility. There are undeniable vulnerabilities in limited supply chain diversity. And the pandemic has continued to demonstrate the importance of resilient supply chains. Free trade and well-functioning markets are more than simply an economic necessity. And it's absolutely critical that in thinking about this, we're thinking about how those markets operate and keeping those markets open. So coupled with opportunities for supply chain diversification, well-functioning markets provide a vital defense against economic shocks, and they strengthen supply chain resilience, increasingly pressing challenge in the context of the booming global demand. So despite those challenges, history tells us that times of greatest challenge, also greatest opportunity. I reckon that with the right ambition and motivation, we can absolutely overcome those challenges. And they really do provide huge opportunities for increased coordination and collaboration between nations and with the private sector. We see this opportunity in lots of areas, in innovative finance solutions for research and development, or investment into developing the circular economy through recycling and reuse of metals, improvement in manufacturing processes, product performance to make products more eco-friendly, less energy hungry, longer lasting, easier to recycle and repair. And as new technologies are deployed at unprecedented scale to deliver this green industrial revolution, it's going to be essential to limit additional pressures on the environment that could arise from extraction. So how do we minimize the impact of mining operations, mitigate the risk of environmental challenges? All of that's going to require really strong economic and social governance frameworks, as well as investment in innovation and new technologies that improve the extraction process and mitigate mining environmental impact. I thought the report in this context was incredibly useful and helpful, and helped really to highlight a couple of very important issues. And I totally recognise in particular that second recommendation around international engagement, diversification of supply chain. It's a really important year for us in the UK to be considering and driving thinking on these issues. We will use our G7 presidency and our hosting of COP26 to spearhead global action on sustainability, including in the context of critical materials. We've all got a part to play in shaping how this looks, so this conference is really timely. In any case, it's a real honour to join such a truly distinguished field of experts and stakeholders, the breadth of which reflects the fact that the task of building this sustainable, viable, critical materials industry is one that requires genuine effort across government, business, and the wider community, as the report clearly recognises. So look forward to participating in the discussion, and thank you all for your time this morning.
Thanks very much, Andrew. So I'll move straight on to the next speaker, who's Emma Schofield, who's the Platinum Group Metal Research Fellow at Johnson Matthey, where she's been since 2004. Must be a good employer. I hope your wages have gone up a bit in the interim. But over to you, Emma.
I wanted to start by thanking the organisers at Birmingham and Exeter Universities for the opportunity to be part of the commission, and also to the EPSRC for funding the network. From the perspective of the secondary economy, there's one group of technology critical metals that gives the appearance of having got it sorted. The platinum group metals are technology critical because they're irreplaceable. Platinum group metals in catalytic converters clean up the air, never mind the exhaust gases. They're used in industrial catalysts, in high performance electronics, and rather highly valued in jewellery and in investment. And it's because they're so expensive that it's worth the effort to collect and refine them. The supply chains for recycling catalytic converters have developed since the 1970s without legislative intervention, and refining efficiencies for this market can be much greater than the global average of 70%. But there are other areas of platinum group metal recycling that are nowhere near as efficient. Less than 5% of platinum group metals in waste is recovered. Why is that? The problem is it's a very small amount of metal in a horrendous mixture of other things. With the process technologies we have at the moment, it just isn't efficient to get the platinum group metal out. Globally, about a third of the platinum, palladium and rhodium which is used in a year comes from recycling. The other 2/3 still has to be dug out of the ground. Did you know that there's a world leading refiner of platinum group metals in the UK? Johnson Matthey has spent 200 years developing the technical process capability, supply chains and metal management expertise that allows us to be the biggest global secondary refiner of platinum group metals. Because we're UK based, we can work in close collaboration with outstanding UK academics and supported by the various UK government research and innovation funding agencies. And recommendation 2 in the report is about doing this for the other technology critical metals. The next 10 years is going to be a period of fast technology development. Platinum group metals in fuel cells, rare earths in magnets, base metals in batteries, the whole hydrogen economy, all these metals are pivotal in the energy technologies that the UK will be reliant on to achieve net zero targets. Recommendation 7 of the report is therefore about prioritising research and development of technology critical metals. We need an innovation strategy that focuses on their sourcing, supply, use, and recovery. This is about capitalising on the market-leading skills base and technical capability that we have in the UK and in investing in skills sharing and collaboration. Recommendation 6 in the report highlights the increasingly urgent need to improve the way we process. There's no point trying to save energy by using recycled platinum in an industrial process catalyst if recycling uses more energy than the catalyst saves. It's quite hard to make this one sound dynamic and exciting, but process research and life cycle assessment are fundamental to minimising the environmental impacts of processing and achieving net zero. The other topic that at first glance seems to be profoundly unexciting is waste. But one person's waste is another person's feed. I mean, jewellers in Hatton Garden vacuum clean their workshops, and we turn that waste back into bits of defibrillators. The point of recommendation 10 is that any barriers to managing, handling, and transporting waste globally are barriers to a genuinely circular economy. I started off by saying the platinum group metals can give the impression of having this whole circular economy thing sorted, but in reality, none of the critical raw materials have, which is why we've concisely summarised the problem in only 150 pages of this all-important report. Thanks for your attention.
Many thanks, Emma. And I just say that Emma, in the various meetings we've had, has always been there, right at the forefront of the key issues. So from me as chair of the Commission, thanks, Emma. Your contribution has been fantastic since the Commission started. So now I'd like to move to Neil Glover, who is Head of Materials Research in the Central Technology and Strategy Group of Rolls-Royce. Quite an acronym and a list. But Neil, very nice to see and very nice to have you here. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sir John, and thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. As an industrialist, I'd like to comment on the application. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Oh, that's odd.
Orlando, can you make certain that Neil appears on the screen? Because if I can't see him, I don't think others can.
There are 2 screens here, and yes, most of us can see him, I think.
Okay.
But he may, if you roll onto your next screen, you may see him. He may magically appear.
Not necessarily
carry
something
on,
you
Neil.
would want.
Sorry to interrupt you. I was concerned that you disappeared. Okay,
No
please
problem.
continue.
Yeah, so I'd like to comment on the application and management of technology critical metals, particularly for future clean technology. And to emphasise that access to technology critical metals is vital to the success of UK high value manufacturing, as they enable many of our current and future advanced materials and applications. One existing application is clearly in my own area, the high temperature alloys and coatings used in gas turbines. But the world is changing rapidly. And as we drive towards greening and decarbonisation of the economy, the further application of technology critical metals is especially important. The case for hybridization of aerospace is extremely strong and is underpinned by the use of technology critical metals throughout magnetic, electromagnetic machines and energy storage systems. But their applications span sectors from automotive to energy generation, whether it be traditional or green, wind and solar, through chemical engineering and catalysis, as Emma has commented, to electronics and defense uses. And it's particularly related to the growth in hybrid electric technology for propulsion. So materials, as we know, can be critical for various reasons, whether it be true scarcity, geopolitical factors of distribution or market failure, processing technology limitations, environmental impact, or issues associated with ethics or conflict. And in some cases, this is compounded by the complexity and the multi-layered nature of the supply chains, and the fact that the materials themselves may not be primary products, but could be a secondary or a tertiary byproduct of the extraction of other materials. An example would be rhenium in the case of turbine blade materials, which is a byproduct of molybdenum, which is itself a byproduct of copper, which leads to some difficult market dynamics. And as such, it's important that for each metal and each use case, we conduct a thorough analysis and understand the nature of the risks and have a robust approach to the mitigation of those risks. But whatever the scenario, the long-term assured continuity of supply is critical, and critical at acceptable price and ethical standards. That's especially the case for long life cycle products, where the performance of the product is dependent upon the material's capability. And as such, the manufacturers, the OEMs, need to know that the material will be available both at the point of design and development of a product, but also through the decades of product application and manufacture and support. If a technology is not robustly available, then the product may not be able to be offered to market. And once we're committed to the use of a technology critical metal in a product, then it can be very, very difficult to back that application out without having an impact on the performance of the product. So there are many established uses, the refractory metals, the platinum group metals, for instance, in high temperature materials and coatings, where strategies have been developed to mitigate these risks. And these strategies can be financial, they can be through commercial long-term agreements or physical stock holding, but they can also be technological, particularly the careful optimization of the use of materials and the design of alloy compositions, the optimum use of those materials in design to make sure we get the maximum benefit throughout the life cycle of a small amount of a critical material, and the frugality through processing and closed looping of resources. And here a really good example again is rhenium, where the aerospace industry is extremely careful to capture all of the waste, from casting scraps to grinding sludges to filter papers to sweepings off factory floors, and make sure that all of that is closed looped back through the manufacturing and goes back into the production of raw material. Often we talk about the substitution of technology critical metals, and in some cases this is possible, but as I've said, is often associated with a performance penalty and is fraught with difficulty. No one uses an expensive and scarce material lightly. Their applications are the result of long and careful optimization, and each element is added for a unique benefit. There are some examples of where uncertainty in supply is intolerable and materials have been removed from application, for instance, ruthenium in turbine blade alloys, but only with the acceptance again of a performance debit in the ultimate product. So although solutions have been found for many of these mature applications, there are changing needs and expanding requirements driven by the rapid expansion in decarbonisation and electrification, which is shifting the position. And we're seeing an increased demand for new materials, for some existing materials, and a demand for new materials of concern, particularly around battery and magnetic materials, cobalt, rare earths, lithium, and so on. The significant expansion in demand for volume and global competition is exacerbating factors of scarcity and geopolitical distribution and market manipulation, and presents a threat and an opportunity. Understanding mitigation approaches are needed for all of these technical critical metals. And if the supply is not available, then a product will not be viable, or manufacturing may be forced to move to a region where supply is available. So we need an expansion of primary supplies with sustainability and security. We need strategies for alternate or compliant sources to be developed, which are economically viable. We need efficiency in processing so we can compete on cost. We need closed looping, as we've discussed, of waste streams and robust end-of-life management. And we need sources that comply to the highest ESG standards defined against internationally accepted criteria. And all of this needs to be supported with information, systems of standards and means of compliance that can be practically applied by industry. And it critically needs a joined-up approach across sectors. No individual use case will be enough to drive an economically sustainable model here for the UK. So based on that, I fully support the recommendations of this report, and I'd like to thank you for your time. Thank you.
Neil, thank you very much indeed. So now the next speaker is Alexander Stafford. Alexander, I'm delighted you've been able to join us. I knew you were running late, and fortunately you have managed to get here on time. Alexander is Vice Chair of the All-Party Group on Critical Materials and members of the BEIS Committee. So over to you, sir.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and I'm sorry I was a few minutes late. I was in the virtual chamber asking a question, so I do apologise. And actually, I just wanted to share some good news with this group here that as we were speaking, I have just been granted a debate on critical minerals in renewable technologies for Monday week, so Monday the 15th. So it's a German debate, so it's a shorter debate. In other words, it's mainly me speaking and then the minister responding and maybe one other member getting involved at the end of the day. But I think this is the first time critical minerals has got its own dedicated debate in Parliament. So hopefully that will really get some issues out of this. I can learn a lot from this call. But also, I'm going to quick plug, if you want me to think I should be talking about anything in Parliament, do drop me an email, because this is an opportunity to get this issue really on the government agenda. And that's why I'm passionate about this. I think it's safe to say critical minerals is such an important pressing issue when it comes to our future. And I think it's been really brought home over the last year in two ways. First of all, the rise of renewable technologies and frankly, the need and want for the government to actually get this going and understand it. And secondly, in my view, is the pandemic has really brought home to the government that we cannot rely on our current sources of critical minerals. And what I mean by that is, if you in some ways equate minerals to PPE, we at the moment are getting most of our critical minerals from countries like China, as well as places in Africa, which are frankly controlled by China, either directly or indirectly. And as we saw with the PPE issue last March time, where most of our PPE came from China, when there was a global crunch on PPE, China and other similar countries, Turkey another example, either didn't send stuff they were meant to send a contractual aid, or they sent us substandard stuff. Now, this really has brought home to the government that in this future, where the future is going renewable, there'll be more and more demand for these minerals. We need to have safe, reliable supplies that we can rely on, either from homegrown sources, and I know there's a lot of work going on with the likes of Cornish Lithium and other such organizations, or deal with countries that frankly we can rely on, are sort of traditional allies, in inverted commas, democratic, safe countries, the likes of Australia, even places like Greenland, obviously through Denmark, because we cannot rely on the current supply chain at the moment. And let's be honest, the more and more, as we go more and more into the green future, which is great, we're going to need more and more of these types of minerals, but we cannot rely on our current supply. And we need to almost wean ourselves off that. On top of that, a lot of these countries have huge issues when it comes to human rights records, environmental records. So we are creating this great new technology for better for the environment, but in some ways we are just offsetting and off-shipping our environmental problems, in fact, making it worse in other countries. We need to have a supply chain completely that is low carbon, has good human rights records, and is not bad for the environment. Otherwise, frankly, us backing in renewables is completely pointless if we're just sort of offshoring our problems, so we can just sit nicely in the UK and think, aren't we doing a great job? We're not. We're just offsetting our problems. And that is a key issue with me, that I want to get involved with, and why I think this is very important. Now, I think, to be quite honest, the government, frankly, hasn't really been embracing this until very recently. I would say even I've raised this with the Secretary of State for Bays and other people, and it's never been really top front of their mind, because we haven't had an issue getting the minerals, hasn't really think it. But I think this year, with everything going on, that is really focusing the mind. And I know, for instance, what with the G7 down in Cornwall this year, I know that the government is very passionate, and COP at the end of this year. This year is the year to talk about this issue. And I know obviously with the Prime Minister down in Cornwall, it's a great time with obviously Cornish Lithium, great example of a company that is doing this work to actually talk about these issues and really get the government involved. So it's a mixture here to sort of hear what you're saying and say and tell my perspective, because I really think this is a great year to be involved in this sector, to get things going. And it really is a moment in time where we can actually focus people's minds, because, you know, give it another year, if we don't push ahead quickly with discussing this, people's minds forget what happened last year. They move on. We just need to be ahead of the curve. So it's great that we're having discussions like this, and it's great to be involved. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Alexander. The next speaker is the Shadow Green New Deal in Energy Minister, Dr. Alan Whitehead MP. Alan, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. I am not now. Thank you very much, Sir John. I'm delighted to be at this seminar this morning and also hear about what I think is such an important report that is coming out shortly on this issue, because I've been thinking about this for quite a while, particularly in the context of what we've already committed ourselves to do in terms of decarbonisation of a whole range of areas, yet with no plan as to how we actually go about delivering those things which will enable our economy to be decarbonised. And what I mean by no plan is not that we've not got a plan to do the things. We haven't got a plan either to recycle what it is we've actually put in to operation so that we can recover critical metals from those things that we are putting in place. And indeed, as Alexander has said, no plan to actually prioritise the sources of where we get critical metals from, or indeed how we might develop those as far as UK production is concerned. So we know that wind turbines, 40 gigawatts of offshore just coming in shortly, use a whole range of rare earths in their magnets and various other things. Solar panels, gallium and lithium, cobalt, lithium-ion batteries contain lithium, cobalt, and graphite, and of course electric motors using lithium, hydrogen fuel cells requiring platinum group metals, and so on. So there's a huge new industry coming up in front of us, which is the low carbon equivalent of the coal industry of the past. And it seems quite bizarre at the moment that, for example, we are apparently going to open a new coal mine in Cumbria, and yet down in Cornwall and Devon, mines which actually could produce vital new critical metals, such as Drakeford mine, tungsten, and indeed, as Alexander's mentioned, the lithium supplies in Cornwall. These are languishing, are not producing, or have no serious plan for production. So my view is that we need to have a plan here in the UK, and we need to have a plan fast, which combines increasing UK production, getting serious about recycling of rare earths so that we can actually recycle them into the economy in a serious way, and the idea that we should actually just export a load of those really very precious metals because we can't reprocess them in the UK seems to be extremely short-sighted. And indeed, which I know University of Birmingham is actively involved in, looking at how you can develop a number of these crucial low carbon technologies with substitute technologies such as sodium ion batteries and so on, rather than lithium ion batteries and what have you. So I think it's a crucial endeavor that you're involved in right now. And from our part as politicians, I think it's our duty to back you up by making all the noise we can in the House and making all the noise we can do in terms of forums which actually discuss the rolling forward of low carbon technologies. We're on a one-way track as far as low carbon is concerned. There's no going back away from net zero. But if we don't, as it were, get our act together in moving forward, both securing supplies and getting critical supplies, ideally from within the UK, then we'll have a very rocky road towards net zero indeed. I'm delighted, by the way, that Alexander, you've got a German debate next week in the House I think you've got a short debate, so I won't be able to reply on behalf of the opposition. But believe me, if you had a longer debate, I would be there like a shot.
Thanks very much, Alan. I should say from the chair, it's very pleasing to see the continuity of views between the government and the opposition on this. And it really is something that is so important that it's very pleasing to see that people essentially from both the opposition and the government are thinking very much along the same lines and seeing the importance of actually addressing this issue. So I'll now turn to our last formal speaker today, Frances Wall. She's Professor of Applied Mineralogy at the Camborne School of Mines. Camborne School of Mines was the main rival of the Imperial College School of Mines, which I headed for a while. And we used to have regular sporting events between the two, mainly of the sort of rougher variety with a lot of far too much to drink afterwards. I only attended one. I felt I was too old after the first one. So, but without that sort of silliness, I'd like to turn to Frances, who will provide some details of the new Interdisciplinary Centre for a Circular Economy of Technology Metals. So over to you, Frances.
Thank you very much indeed, Sir John. I'd like to point out you've used 42 seconds of my time in talking about rugby, and it's my great pleasure now to tell you a little bit about the new initiative of our Circular Economy Centre. It's called MET4Tech. Oh, there is a slide. If someone's got a slide on the end of the slide pack, I think there might be a slide that you could look at while I'm talking. So we're called MET4Tech, and the long name is the UKRI Interdisciplinary Circular Economy Centre for Technology Metals. It started officially on the 1st of January this year. So as we were putting it together, of course, we were very much informed by the work of the Birmingham Policy Commission. Our new centre is one of 5 circular economy centres in the UK and a coordinating hub. So this is a really major UK research initiative. It was proposed originally by DEFRA and then taken forward by UKRI and now run by EPSRC on behalf of UKRI. And so the first thing that we do with this centre then is bringing together academics from across the whole value chain for circular economy and for technology metals. And I think that that's really important that we've got some of the leading groups in the UK. And in the Policy Commission report, we ask government to have a joined up approach, but of course we need to get our collective act together on the research side as well. And so this is a really useful new initiative for that. And you'll see if you look at the logos on the slide there that we've got a whole array of academics ranging from the Sustainable Consumption Institute at Manchester and the Business and Social Science there through to chemists, processors, geology, material science, engineering, if I said chemistry already, law, and the business school and Camborne School of Mines. So that's, if you see the logos there, Exeter, Leicester, Manchester, the British Geological Survey and the University of Birmingham. So in that group then, there are quite a few of us already sitting on the call today. Altogether, we have 21 co-investigators from across all of those disciplines, and we will have 9 new early career researchers at postdoctoral level and 8 PhD researchers. So very much will be helping to the training of the future people for technology, metals, circular economy in the UK. And we are very much embedded. And if you look on that slide, if anyone can read, I bet that text is really small. This is a grab off the grants on the web. And we have 38 people who kindly wrote letters of support and pledged in kind or cash financial support for the project. So these are project partners from across industry and government. And altogether, we add up that support pledged for the centre as £1.6 million. So thank you very much indeed to there are some people on the call who were part of that. And so you can see that this is very much research embedded with our industry and government partners. And that's why we've got 3 support staff on this centre so that we can really be interactive and service the needs of government and our industry partners to take part in the research. So we have 4 themes then. in the project here. Maybe you could go back on the previous slide and then we'll see the 4 themes. So we're going to start off. Our thematic area 1 is all about the flows and the practices. So this is our observatory. We're setting up a national virtual observatory for technology metals based at the British Geological Survey, which we plan will continue after the 4 years of funding for this centre. And of course, this is research, so it's not just data gathering. We'll look at the environmental rucksack that goes along with these flows and interface, of course, with other projects like the Hub and National Materials Data Centre Initiative. We can't do all the technology metals. I think that's an important thing about this centre. We're not going to solve all the research we need. It's even a little bit scary looking at the 150 pages, as Emma said, of what needs to be done and think about what we can do. So we will start off with some priority targeted metals. We'll do the really obvious ones included in those: lithium, cobalt, rare earths, because that's where we know we can move faster and there's already good things being done and information that we can take. Then our thematic area 2, we will go right to the beginning and go and start with mining and extraction and the raw materials. And that is absolutely part of Circular Economy Centre. We have the whole value chain in this research centre. And it's something, I think, especially for these technology metals where we know we need to put so much more into the economy, that we have to start at the beginning. And you might be pleased to know that our first case study will actually be in Cornwall, where we will work with the 6 exploration projects for minerals, technology metals taking place there, plus the 2 geothermal projects and the rest of the value chain there, and look at what a circular economy system really could be in the UK, in the southwest, in Cornwall. Our thematic area 3 is unashamedly techie, so it's interdisciplinary between the chemists, the engineers and the material scientists. And this is to go into this thorny problem of how do we recycle these things better, that Emma brought up, for example, and Neil talked about as a good example of sweeping rhenium up off the floor. But we have some with Andy Abbott at Leicester and Alan, we have some slightly cleverer solutions, hopefully, so you don't have to sweep up off the floor. Perhaps we want to be able to manufacture more clever in the first place so that you have nice interfaces that will fall apart easily, for example, and you can really recycle better at the end of life and stop these things flowing down the river straight out of a linear economy. And in our thematic area 4, we'll bring together all of those results together with the good practice examples from our partners and an agent-based model, a computer modeling, big data approach to make a roadmap for the UK at the end of our 4 years. But as you've seen, we've got a lot of partners on this project from across the value chain. And so we really hope that it's not about presenting a piece of paper at the end of 4 years, as was said already today. This is happening now. And so our idea of the roadmap is that we're already traveling with our partners on that road by the time we get to the end of the 4 years. Thank you very much.
Francis, thank you very much. Very intriguing, and delighted to see that this initiative is really taking off. I think the only comment I'd said, you've got so many partners in different parts of the UK. Virtual communication is clearly going to save a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, which I'm sure you would be conscious of that anyway. So look, we're now moving to the final stage of our meeting today, pretty much to time. And we're looking now for comments and questions. At the start of this meeting today, I did say, think of the arithmetic. And so I'm hoping that people will ask questions and make comments, not much more than about 2 minutes max, which will give a chance for everyone else to speak. I'm normally a very friendly chairman. Some people have called me Stalinist, but that was a foul slander. But I think what I would be looking to do is to have as many people as possible. Now, due to the wonders of technology, at least in my home in the Cotswolds, I can only see one screen at the moment. So if you put your hand up, the way I was taught this morning was to go to the top bar and press more if you have a relatively primitive system that I do, or otherwise show your hand. And what we'll be looking for is people's names, and then I'll come to you, and then you unmute and make your comment. What I will need is some assistance from colleagues, Vicky and others, so that if somebody is, I'm missing them, then somebody says, John, you're missing X. So over to you. First one to raise the hand, and the first one for me to see raising the hand will be the first one who speaks. The floor is now open. Yes, Tariq.
Thank you,
Tariq Ali.
Stephen. Thank you. Hope everybody can hear me. I was just sitting here thinking to myself, if there was only a national funding agency that had £50 million to spend in the next few years that was looking for national strategic priority areas, wouldn't that be great? But seriously, I would be interested in the panel's thoughts about this topic being brought up or taken on by ARIA as one of its key priorities in the first few years, because clearly it's relevant across all of the TRLs, and also will help to develop those business sectors that are so sorely needed in all the talks that we've just heard today. So back to the panel.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wanting the floor? I think I got a message that someone did, but the message flashed up too quickly for me.
John, Pam's raising a hand if you can't see her. Pam Thomas.
Okay, Pam, over to you. Unmute.
Hello, thank you very much, Sir John, and everybody. Really, really interesting, really important. I'm speaking as CEO of the Faraday Institution. So obviously I'm very interested in materials for batteries. And so one of our projects is about going to low or zero cobalt batteries, and just reflecting upon that as a strategy, given what was said by Rolls-Royce. And also what's been said by Frances about the projects she's leading on. So just a comment about cobalt, please.
Thanks very much. Robin Grimes. Robin, do you want to make a comment?
Thanks, John. Actually, I put it in the chat because I think it's more of a sort of a general thought for people to contemplate. This is a really excellent report. It's full of really good stuff. It's really important that we all think about how it can have greater impact within government. And I just wondered whether or not, there are plans at the moment, but in particular, how we could all help to realise that. And I just wondered whether Alan might be able to help us and point some ways for us to have that impact. Thanks.
Alan, I'll give you a chance to comment towards the end. Jeff Townsend.
Thank you, Sir John. So I founded the Critical Minerals Association, and also as a graduate of Birmingham University, I'm really happy to see this conference today. I just wanted to get a point across, really, which is there's 172 gigafactories being built in the world at the moment, and 130 of those are in China. So any idea that China is going to put the 42 outside of their country ahead of their own is not really realistic. And the other thing is then we find ourselves in a race against our friends in Europe and other nations for securing the supply chain. So I think what's really important is we have to understand the necessity of speed on this, not to rush, but we do need to make actions and progress quickly in terms of turning great ideas and great strategies into actionable content.
Thanks very much. Other comments and questions, please. Am I missing anyone?
Baroness Northover said in the chat that she had a question.
Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I keep on putting up my hand, which immediately, the yellow hand, and it immediately goes down again. I've got to declare an interest, which is association with Pensana, which sources rare earths in Angola, which is actually, picking up on Alexander's point, a reforming, under a reforming government now, which is excellent to see in Angola. And the plan is to process at Salt End. But my question is about the Brexit implications here. Reference was made at the very beginning to the work that basically that we were part of what the EU was doing in terms of critical mineral supplies, and that now we're obviously separated out. Now we've got various car manufacturers who said that they will be moving to producing electric vehicles, and of course we have a massive expansion of wind turbines, and the Dogger Bank wind farm and so on and so forth. So huge demand. The car industry which we've got in the United Kingdom at the moment has indicated that it intends to stay. There are some question marks over that, because obviously it's got to be able to sell into the continent of Europe. There are all sorts of exemptions at the moment relating to renewables in terms of our trade with the EU, but those will potentially come to an end. But what I wanted to know from people was the implications here, because if we can't be producing the batteries, for example, here, and therefore we run into problems on rules of origin exporting into the EU. I mean that has major implications for our car industry here, deciding that it's better to be based in the EU. And so therefore, what can we do to make sure that we are working as closely as we can be? And I should declare myself as a Lib Dem, and you know where I come from in terms of Brexit. How can we make sure we work as closely as we can do with the EU on this, in terms of this enormous challenge, which has suddenly been picked up right across the world, the United States, China, and the EU. We're all very concerned about sourcing what we need for renewables, and we've got to work together to make this work effectively for mutual benefit.
I wonder, could I pose that question to Andrew Mitchell? Andrew, as a sort of civil servant, it's sort of it's the sort of thing that you should be up for thinking about. Do you want to comment, sir?
Yeah, thanks very much indeed, John. And I think we have Simon Strickland also on the call today, who might be able to also offer some comment from the perspective of the Cabinet Office. I mean, I sort of recognise the point entirely. I mean, I think, from our perspective, the deal that was done on trade with the European Union is a sort of critical underpinning to ensuring that supply chains in particular continue to function as between ourselves and our European counterparts. We recognise, to the point about the importance of the automotive industry for the United Kingdom and the relationship absolutely with critical minerals. I mean, I think, from our perspective, and this is very particularly the role of the Department for International Trade, we're doing a lot of work at the moment, both with potential investors into the United Kingdom. This is a very important element of ensuring that we can meet that net zero commitment. So we need investment in the UK, and that's part also, as I mentioned earlier on, of the strategy for ensuring that we've got jobs and growth across the United Kingdom. So garnering that investment, making sure that investment comes into the United Kingdom is really important. And we're also using, as I mentioned earlier on, the G7 presidency and are hosting the COP26 to focus global attention on the importance of those fluid global supply chains. So in particular, the resilience panel under the G7 chaired by Mark Sedwill is going to look at the issues associated with the supply chain resilience, principles around trade in critical minerals, etc. And we're doing a lot of work right now. Various folks have said on this call, the government needs to focus on all of this, and I think it is a big focus in government right now. And the work that we're doing is really about understanding those supply chains, understanding how they work, where the potential critical risks might be, both in the context of countries that, from our perspective, do pose risks as potential suppliers. And as we saw, various people have referenced this during the COVID crisis, that is a sort of real material issue. So both the geographic risks, but also the competition, the supply risks, and actually coming to a view about what that means in terms of what we need domestically. So I'm conscious I've covered a lot of ground there, but I can only agree that this is critical and urgent, and just say that this is a set of activities that within the Department for International Trade we're very focused on, doing a lot of work on at the moment.
Many thanks. Clovis.
Hello, everybody. I'm afraid this is another question for you, or likely to be for you, Andrew, which is that one of the first recommendations in this report is that there should be a strategic body coordinating critical mineral technology, critical mineral supplies and so on. And looking at this as a former civil servant, it does seem to me that it's an issue which falls between several stools, particularly between BEIS and DIT, who've got different interests. And so I just wondered whether you thought it was likely that such a strategic body might be set up as a way of kicking this can a bit further down the road. Second thing is really about resource diplomacy, because I don't really understand what that means, because at the end of the day, it's about money and about buying and selling things. And of course, diplomacy is important, but within the international system of trade, I'm not quite sure how that works. And finally, quick one about the new Infrastructure Development Bank, which is announced in the budget. I haven't read the detail of that, but I wonder if that's going to be the source of investment money into the UK industry.
Okay, I'll hold going to Andrew Mitchell for the moment, but I actually wonder, Alexander, would you be happy to comment on some of the generalities here? We will not be holding the government to anything you say, no fear.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And obviously, just to clarify, although I'm a member of it, I'm not actually the government. I think you're right.
Sorry.
And what I think we need, and I think what the government is going to start looking at, is a sort of cross-party, minerals cross-party government strategy, which is not happening. I think I took part in a cross-departmental call with members of the industry a few weeks ago, and I think it was telling. I think there were about 8 different government departments on the call, or maybe even 9. It was an obscene amount of government departments, which is great to show that they are interested in this issue. But everyone from DEFRA to DCMS, along with the more obvious ones like BEIS and stuff, and the MOD. So I think at the moment it's still in that early stage. The government departments are not talking to each other enough, and I think that is one of the big issues we're getting. But once again, what I'm saying is things have moved on even the last 6 months. Actually, now this is on the agenda. This is being talked about, and they are trying to work this together. But unless we have a cross-departmental strategy, it's really not going to get anywhere. But I'm having conversations with Anne-Marie Trevelyan, who is the Minister for Renewables, on this sort of issue as well. She's keen to push this forward. And I'll say again, with COP coming and the G7 coming up, this really is that moment where there's drive and passion about this. And this is why it is really an exciting time to be involved, because we can actually get some stuff done, but we have to work together. And actually, as an industry, as well as the academic side of it, have to present the arguments to help the government, because I think it's one of these things that it could be a flash in the pan, frankly, unless there is that support from across the industry, across academic side, across research, saying why it's so important. Because there'll be something new and flashier down the line in a few months' time, and then the government may lose interest unless there is that sort of overwhelming support. So the government, myself, we need your help to try and push this as well. We can't, as politicians, we can't do this alone. So we need that sort of support.
Thanks very much, Alexander. I would have normally gone to Alan Whitehead to see if he had anything to add, but unfortunately, Alan has had to move off and left the meeting. So let me see if there are any other questions. Clovis, I'm conscious that only part of your question has been answered, but I'm wanting to see you to expand it a bit. So others, please. Any other questions any other hands showing, or people who work out and raise a hand?
There's one from Ian Higgins from LCM.
Okay, thanks. Ian, over to you.
Hello, John. Thank you. I'm sorry I got to wind the conversation back to Lindsay's point from probably 20 minutes ago, asking about the relationship with Europe. And just for clarification for the group, I work for Less Common Metals, and we sit in the rare earth magnet supply chain. We are currently undertaking a UK government funded feasibility study into supply chains, and we've worked extensively in examining supply chains for rare earths for many years now. So we're currently looking at supply chains for to establish a stable, secure availability of magnets in the UK. But to answer Lindsay's question directly, yes, we absolutely need cooperation with Europe. Today, being blunt, the market for the magnets is European based, and yeah, we all hope to stimulate a greater level of UK domestic market. But today, the market for all our products is European based. We are getting a lot of interest from European entities in what we're doing in the UK. There are some advantages in much as we do seem to be more flexible in what we're doing. I'll comment, as well as our UK work, we sit on we were a founding member of the European Raw Materials Association, and we're asked to front up a work package again on primary supply, which we were doing up till very recently, when the IRMA group came to us quite sheepishly and said they've suddenly decided that as a UK entity, it's not right, we should be fronting a European work package. So we've been summarily booted off that. But what I certainly see is a scope now for a greater level of flexibility in the UK for us to act quickly and efficiently, rather than the IRMA group, which does seem to be quite unwieldy. So it's basically a case levering the advantage we've got in terms of how we may be able to react quickly, but we certainly need to maintain the relationships in Europe and not to put any barriers up in terms of being able to sell our products from the UK into Europe.
Thanks very much. Andrew Abbott, did you wanted to make a comment about battery technology? Unmute.
There's a chat going on in the chat box. It was mostly about how objects are designed for recycle, and what you find is that we've heard that the Chinese are leading in many of these materials, but what you're finding over there is that they're now designing materials for recycle, and also what is occurring there is there's collaboration between manufacturers and recyclers, which I don't think we've got such a good structure of in the West. Okay,
thank you. The issue on how one links in with the European Union and indeed other parts of the world is obviously a very general and largely political one. I'm conscious that I'm slightly overusing Andrew, but Andrew, do you want to make an initial comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, this goes also to Clovis's point about, what is resource diplomacy? And I mean, I'd perhaps just say a couple of things about that. And I talked about the trade and cooperation agreement with our European counterparts as the basis of a trade relationship. And I suppose the other point to make is that, we do recognize that these supply chains are global in nature, that there are strong interdependencies economically between ourselves and our European counterparts, and it's therefore that is the basis of building a constructive relationship on critical materials. What we're doing in mapping supply chains is understanding, in a sense, the underpinning of that economic relationship, so that absolutely we can engage. And I think it's fair to say that we will, and we're in the process now of really thinking through how we work bilaterally, but also with the European Union as a whole in a lot of these areas. And a lot of that work, of course, suspended during the period that we were negotiating the TCA. This is a different stage in that relationship. So, and I'm relatively optimistic about all of this going forward, I must say, because I think ultimately, we're talking about the industries of the future here. If we're going to be successful as economies, lots of people talked about China in this particular context. As Europeans, we do have quite a strong interest in ensuring that we're capable of leading the way. The other aspect to this, I mentioned the G7 panel, and this in a sense goes to Clovis's question about resource diplomacy. I mean, in a way, there's a discussion going on globally at the moment about the rules of the road for trade. We need to depart into questions around the viability and the current pressures on the WTO and the global multilateral trading system. But the reality is that in all new industries, there is always a requirement to regulate. There's always a requirement through trade agreements, through multilateral and bilateral and plurilateral trading agreements, to create the rules of the road for trade. And part of the point about, for example, UK joining the CPTPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, we launched our application on the 1st of February, it is that we want to work with like-minded partners in helping to deliver the framework for trade that supports what we want to do: free and open markets, fair competition, etc., including in these new industries. So there's a tremendous amount of work going on all of this. I mean, I would just simply say that trade diplomacy is a very important part of that, because it is actually about creating the frameworks within which we can trade effectively on a basis that respects the standards that we want to see respected in industries such as these.
Thanks very much. I'm conscious that Clovis has an unanswered question about, as it were, internal in the UK and the links between ministries. But let's see if there's any more questions about other matters. Alan?
I wanted to come back to a couple of points, John. I mean, Ian has hinted upon it here, but the coordination with Europe, I fear that that's not going to happen necessarily in some of these areas. Being on the ground and having spent a lot of time, as has Ian, writing these roadmaps, it's clear that, you know, to some extent, we're being pushed to the side. And that we could really do with the help with in a coordinated approach from the UK. And I'm not sure what form that takes, whether it's partnering projects that are funded through the UK, through some of the strategies we have here and some of the funding sources, or whether it's a direct approach to the IRMA project, Ian. But it's clear that, having spent all of this time writing these roadmaps over the last few years, that we are being sidelined in some of those projects.
Okay, well, I think that's something that we maybe will need to take off screen, as it were, but obviously that's very concerning, and how one can, in a sense, sort of persuade our partners in Europe to work with us, both on the scientific and the engineering side, as well as the more political and trade-based issues, it's not an easy problem, and it's relatively early days yet. I have time for one more question or comment. Anyone want to put their hand up? Am I missing anyone, Gavin?
John, can I just jump in on Alan's comment there? I'd just be very careful about differentiating between the IRMA group, which is a kind of very much the management of IRMA, the European Raw Materials Association, and the actual members. And I think there are opportunities here, because I think within individual members, there's a lot of interest in what we're doing in the UK. So although they're European-based entities, clearly the IRMA management are very much driving for a Europe excluding UK kind of structure. But within the individual members, I think there are opportunities for us to cooperate.
Okay.
And to get.
Thanks, that's very helpful. Look, I think we're coming to an end, and if I'm not missing any new hands, I hope. What I'd like to just do now is, first of all, the sort of conventional thing. Thank you all very much. I think it's been a really useful discussion. Early days, in the sense that you've not had a chance to read the full report, but you've seen some summaries of it. As I understand it, the expectation is the edited full version will be going out some time in the next few days. That will depend on whether the work can all get done. But also, we are planning to have a public launch of the report sometime after Easter. So if you could you keep out for the, look out for that announcement. I used to be an epidemiologist when I was the government chief scientific advisor, and my strong bet from that knowledge perception is it will be another virtual meeting. though I do think we have hoped to book a space in the House of Lords. But even with our vaccination program and the success in reducing the incidence, my hunch is it will have to be virtual, but I would be absolutely delighted to be proved wrong on that. I think it's been a very good time. I appreciate all of you actually. And in particular, I think I would like to thank Alexandra and Alan from Parliament, giving up time in a very difficult time. And I think the other thing to sort of say in general is that this has been pretty pleasurable for me. I knew a little bit about this. I still know a little bit about this, but I think I would argue I know a little bit more. Lindsay, thank you. Yes, I know the House of Lords will be open, but whether we can get delegates to actually attend it, Lindsay's pointed out to me that the House of Lords will be opening in April. Whether in fact it will be open, whether we will be able to get sufficient delegates, don't know, but hope so. So look, thank you all very much. Obviously, this has been an initiative of the University of Birmingham, and I think it's been a pretty good one. The issues are enormously important for the future of the UK, and I have to say it's not common to have a meeting like this in which essentially people were violently agreeing with each other most of the time. That is always a pleasure of a meeting to chair. And so look, I'm going to conclude. Thank you all very much. In particular, I think I should thank Alan and Paul who at Birmingham who have been taking this forward, and their colleagues, but also the commissioners. You have all been really splendid. Some of you have been able to attend, others have not, but it actually has been a team event. And I very much look forward, as I said earlier on, to the formal launch. And I would be absolutely delighted if it was in the House of Lords, and I would get domestic permission to have a glass of wine around it. So think about the timing of it. So 10 in the morning is not really good for a pre-meeting glass of wine. So thank you very much. We have 1 minute to go. So in my chairing mode, I have now given you 1 minute of your life back. You can use it as you will. And I now declare this meeting closed. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.